On June 5th, 1983, Grenada's Prime Minister, Maurice Bishop, addressed an audience of some 3,000 people at Hunter College in New York City. Bishop was in the United States as part of his government's long-standing policy to normalize relations with the United States. But the Reagan administration, rather than consenting to meet with the Prime Minister, stepped up its attacks against Grenada, accusing the Bishop government of being a Soviet-Cuban pawn and a threat to democracy in the region.
The real reason for all of this hostility is because some perceive that what is happening in Grenada can lay the basis for a new socio-economic and political path of development. They give all kinds of reasons and excuses, some of them credible, some utter rubbish. There's an interesting one that we saw very recently in a secret report of the State Department. I want to tell you about that one, so you can reflect on that one. That secret report made this point, that Grenada is different to Cuba and Nicaragua, and the Grenada Revolution is in one sense even worse, I'm using their language, than the Cuban and Nicaraguan revolutions, because the people of Grenada and the leadership of Grenada speaks English and therefore can communicate directly to the people of the United States. But I want to tell you what that same report also said, and said that also made us very dangerous. And that is that the people of Grenada and the leadership of Grenada are predominantly black. They said that 95% of our population is black, and they had a correct statistic. And if we have 95% of predominantly African origin in our country, then we can have a dangerous appeal to 30 million black people in the United States.
Less than 5 months after his appearance at Hunter College, Maurice Bishop, a number of leading members of the New Jewel movement, and many Grenadan citizens were killed.
The Caribbean is a region of many cultures and peoples who share a common history. Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique make up a small country in the Caribbean Sea. The country's 110,000 people are mostly of African descent. They took control of their lives and their future through a revolution on March 13, 1979, the first revolution in the English-speaking Caribbean. First, the Arawaks inhabited the island, and then the Caribs, from whom the region gets its name. When the Europeans came to the region, many Caribs resisted and were killed. Some leaped to death in the sea rather than submit to domination. From the time Europeans first came to this region, they fought one another for control of the area's land, wealth, and sea lanes. Some of the territories fell under British control, others under Spanish, French, or Dutch, but all suffer from the effects of 400 years of exploitation. The British eventually gained control of Grenada and incorporated the island into their colonial system of triangular trade. This system took raw materials and luxury items to Europe and brought finished manufactured goods from Europe to the colonies.
I want to hear the drum.
Africans were captured and brought to the colonies to provide the needed labor. Following the abolition of slavery in 1833, the former slaves were free to work as wage earners on the large estates owned by a local elite. But the triangular trading pattern still continues.
Anything of ours that had any value, had any worth, anything that we are able to produce that can get some money for, have been shipped away. In a way, it seems as if our whole life, or people, or culture, or being have been made to be shipped away to the metropolitan countries. In that whole process of shipping ourselves away, we have been underdeveloped. We have been consciously underdeveloped, if you can call it that way.
When the industrialized countries suffered under the Great Depression of the 1930s, many Grenadians were forced to go to other islands seeking work. There they soon became involved in the trade union and anti-colonial movements which had sprung up throughout the region. In the early 1950s, one Eric Matthew Gary returned to Grenada and organized a union for agricultural workers. He used this position to gain political power, and when Grenada became independent in 1974, Gary became its first prime minister. Sir Eric Gary permitted the economy of his country to continue to serve foreign interests, and he aligned Grenada with other repressive regimes. At the height of Gary's repression, he sent members of his security force to Augusto Pinochet's Chile for training in torture techniques.
What's that?
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Who's your friend?
Right Honorable Sir Eric Gary.
By now, the United States was the dominant force in the region, and it projected Gary as a respectable Caribbean leader. But he led his people to believe that the key to his success and power came from God.
So Eric Gary projects himself as the only person that stands between God and Grenadians. He said several times that he was only answerable to God.
He made the statement himself.
And so people did not find it very easy to challenge the leader, since the leader was God's representative on earth. He was ruling by divine right.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
And therefore all questions relating to his tenure of office, relating to his abuses and so forth, should not be directed to him, but indeed should be directed to God.
In the midst of Gary's tyranny, he was knighted by the Queen of England.
People have tried to get rid of me, and I don't think they can make it. Lots of them who have tried are lying in the cemetery.
How did they die, Prime Minister?
How are they doing?
How did they die?
Natural causes.
Gary's personal corruption led the country into economic decline. Agricultural production dropped 25%. Unemployment rose to 47%. Food prices rose 200%. Clothing 164%. Housing 135%. Moreover, he sexually exploited women who sought work in the public sector. Gary built no new roads, no new schools, no new infrastructure.
Under Gary, there were roads in the hole rather than holes in the road. So bad was the situation. You know, to take a bus from Grenville to St. George's used to cost a laborer what that laborer would make in a day. Remember people coming down the road, either cursing or crying or, in dismay from the kinds of lack of social services that there were in the country. People were taking out their teeth instead of having it repaired, because to fill a tooth was so expensive.
These conditions led to widespread anger and dissatisfaction among Grenadians. The New Jewel movement became the leading opposition party, presenting the people with a platform which clearly outlined a new social and economic system. This approach allowed the people to organize their anger against the Gary regime and his secret police force, the Mongoose Gang.
You look at the Mongoose Gang, and their job, as given by Gary, was to harass, intimidate, beat up, and murder anybody who was opposed to Eric Gary.
They even assassinated Rupert Bishop, the father of the present Prime Minister.
Gary moved in with more and more army forces. And then the guns started firing. I was backed by 4 gunmen. But I passed through because I can't walk faster than a gunshot. There's no use of running.
The unrest continued to mount in the country. In 1979, Gary planned to have the entire NJM leadership killed while he was on a trip to the United States.
The plan was that Gary was going to leave the country on Monday midday. And the instructions that were being left behind was that we should be liquidated. That left us in a position where we had to choose whether to sit and wait for liquidation or whether we should move on the offensive. What we did was that from our positions in hiding, the decision was taken that the next morning we should, at this point in the name of the people, move to seize power from the hands of dictatorship.
It took approximately 24 hours for the revolutionary forces, people who responded to the call of the revolution, to, in fact, seize political power in our country.
The government of the criminal dictator, Eric M. Gary, has been overthrown.
Only 2 people were killed during the revolt. The Mongoose gang was detained in prison. None were executed. Not even the men who killed Rupert Bishop were harmed.
All religious rights and freedom are now restored.
When we explain the gains of the revolution, to take them out of this old style, where they just come from their field, and from the field to their bed, after a while, people begin to understand that all life don't have to be so hard. Things can change, you know.
I once thought that a man has a right to love, maybe a woman or something of the sort. But I later learned that a man has a right to love his country first. We slave for a colonial system, or a capitalistic, or imperialistic system. But now we're slaving for ourselves. If you call it slavery, we're slaving for ourselves.
Gone are the days when our mothers and sisters were sex-exploited for jobs.
Today, the people are enjoying many more democratic rights and freedoms and are much more involved and participating in the building of our revolutionary process.
But this new freedom also meant facing the reality of a country in complete economic disarray. Nearly half of the workforce was unemployed. There was only $24 left in the national treasury. The new government and the people had to move swiftly to bring benefits to the people and at the same time institute a plan for long-term economic stability.
If we are going to talk about the revolution in Grenada, first of all, there was no freedom. There was definitely a government that was in power to keep down each and every person in this island that had the ability or the ambition to go forward, lift the head above the water.
There was practically total support. Witness the complete and easy way in which the takeover took place.
In the beginning, we did have a lot of problem in convincing some workers that they should participate in the class. And some of them were a little bit skeptical and, they didn't have too much confidence, right? But as they got the substance of what the class is all about, the participation increased.
The movement of our women is part of the movement of all our people to extend the rights and the power of all our people in our society.
It doesn't matter if it's women.
We've had an increase in the number of doctors that are working in the General Hospital, the subsidiary hospitals in Karakupiti, Martinique. We have not only had an increase in quantity, but we've had an increase in quality.
prices for Grenada's main export crops, nutmeg, cocoa, and bananas, are controlled by the world market, so the country can never predict its own income potential. Grenada, with some assistance from international development agencies, is now diversifying crops and utilizing modern farming techniques to get out of this state of dependency.
With 400 years of private sector in Grenada and 400 years of 8 million pounds of mangoes falling on the ground and rotting on trees throughout Grenada, it took the PRG to take those mangoes and to can and bottle them, put mango slices, mango juice, mango nectar, nutmeg jelly, tamarind juice, tamarind nectar, and all the other ranges of fruits and juices. All of them, first of all, researched, developed, perfected, and now mass-produced by the People's Revolutionary Government after 400 years of private sector.
Only 8 months after we won our struggle, local counter-revolutionary elements, supported by the American CIA, attempted to destroy our revolution.
The CIA, the notorious American intelligence agency, well known for its destabilizations and its overthrows of progressive governments, had worked out a plan to overthrow our government. This plan involved the use of propaganda destabilization, of economic and violent destabilization, and also of the assassination of our top leadership. This plot was basically going to have 2 stages. The first stage was going to center around firebombing and otherwise burning out buildings in St. George's. The second stage was going to be the landing of the 3 boats in the various parts of the island, and from there signing out to the various targets which these counter-revolutionaries had identified.
To control or destabilize progressive governments, the CIA takes ruthless actions. They incite violence, make false propaganda, and cause labor unrest through their local agents.
On the one hand, of course, they were supposed to build up their trade union organization as a legitimate, with all the appearances of a legitimate trade union organization. But the final purpose of all of these trade union operations was political. That is, the trade union structure was to be developed so that it could serve better political purposes of the CIA.
I'm establishing a permanent, full-time Caribbean Joint Task Force headquarters at Key West, Florida. I will assign to this headquarters forces from all the military services responsible for expanded planning and for conducting exercises. This headquarters unit will employ designated forces for action if required. This will substantially improve our capability to monitor and to respond rapidly to any attempted military encroachment in this region.
Such arrogance has always characterized the U.S. involvement in the Caribbean.
The more than 200 interventions made by the United States, military interventions, since the 1790s, more than 100 of those interventions have been in the Caribbean.
All of these actions have been taken under the guise of fighting the spread of communism and defending the region for U.S.-style democracy. And then
the international community must take this new threat to the region seriously, because the U.S. government has an established pattern of using gunboat diplomacy, blockades, destabilization tactics, and other Cold War measures against the peoples of Latin America and the Caribbean.
If we do not act promptly and decisively in defense of freedom, new Cubas will arise from the ruins of today's conflicts. let our friends and our adversaries understand that we will do whatever is prudent and necessary to ensure the peace and security of the Caribbean area.
On the small island of Grenada, at the southern end of the Caribbean chain, the Cubans, with Soviet financing and backing, are in the process of building an airfield with a 10,000-foot runway. Grenada doesn't even have an air force. Who is it intended for? The Soviet-Cuban militarization of Grenada, in short, can only be seen as power projection into the region, and it is
I have talked with appropriate Navy personnel as well as Air Force personnel who stated unequivocally to me in direct response to questions that I raised. And their statement was that there is no military significance to this airport on the island of Grenada whatsoever. The problems in that region of the world are economic, political, and social and economic. They have to be solved in that context. These are not military problems.
Runway 26. The present airport is too small for cargo planes and for jets, making it inadequate for meeting the needs of Grenada's agricultural and tourism sectors.
Right now,
the Caribbean has been a strategic area for the United States for 150 years. But recently, the problem has been the natural resources of the Caribbean, and particularly oil, Venezuela, Mexico, and other places, and also the importance of the socialist revolution in Cuba, and the fear that socialism would pass to other countries in the Caribbean, and that would naturally weaken U.S. traditional control of the islands and the countries which are adjacent to the Caribbean. In the specific case of Grenada, obviously it's the first English-speaking socialist revolution in the Western Hemisphere. In fact, in the whole world.
How they are so blunt doing these things. They don't even use more imagination. Always the same thing. The Soviet thread, the Cuban thread. The same recipe that was applied in Chile is now being applied in Grenada.
We have to struggle as people who are being destabilized every day to get people out there to understand the really devastating effects of propaganda.
According to the Bureau, it had received complaints about mass torture being practiced by the bishop governments.
You get this whole question of the disinformation being hidden behind the facade of a free press and a free media generally.
The major media, both inside the U.S. and in the Caribbean region, have persistently published stories which reflect the U.S. government's position about Grenada.
It says there are over 700 political prisoners on the island. The number of prisoners far exceeds the capacity of the jails. So Bishop has ordered the construction of prison farms similar to those existing in Cuba. We have some prison farms now. They are warehousing prisoners in semi-trailers received from Cuba, in which they hold them for many hours under the intense heat of the sun that practically cooks them. We cook in prisoners now in warehouses. This is the same year when if you drive around Grenada, you see the most amount of signs of activity of building. When more and more nationals from abroad are coming back home and building new houses. When more and more activity is going on in all of the other areas in terms of the programs of the revolution.
There are those who believe that you cannot have a democracy unless there is a situation where every 5 years and for 5 seconds in those 5 years, a people are allowed to put an X next to some candidate's name. And for those 5 seconds in that 5 years, they become Democrats. And for the remainder of the time, 4 years and 364 days, they become once again non-human, non-people, without any right to say anything to their government, without any right to be involved in running their country.
As Prime Minister Maurice Bishop said, this revolution is creating a new democracy. It has opened up great opportunities for the people to participate in making the decisions which affect their everyday lives and the future of their country.
The United States has stated that Grenada is not democratic because we do not have elections. Our history of electoral rule under the Gary dictatorship did not give our people a chance to have a say in the day-to-day running of Grenada.
Previously, we had elections once every 5 years. Now with the new democracy, the new grassroots democracy, where the masses comes in the organizations and meet on a weekly or monthly basis and discuss a problem in various parts of the country through the mass organization as different, where only 15 men used to discuss the problems of the people before.
Our people have rejected the 5-year Westminster-style democracy because we don't have to wait 5 years to say what we want as a people. We get it every day. We get the opportunity every day.
There is no other country in the English-speaking Caribbean where on any night, in any part of their country, you could find a permanent secretary trade and a budget officer in the Ministry of Finance, together with ministers of government who come forward and report to the people and present themselves for scrutiny. No other country.
Well, my name is Alomenta Bishop, the mother. Well, must I say 3 children? It's only 2 now, eh? What should I say? Yeah. 3 children. I was the mother of Maurice Bishop, who was killed on the 19th of October last year.
Well, essentially, the events of October 19th were the end product of a silent conspiracy which characterized the Bernard Cord faction of the party.
I would say that what happened in October had 2 basic reasons for underlying them. The very first reason is the personal ambition of Bernard Cord. The second element was an element of ultra-leftism.
They use the question of ideology as the excuse for trying to gain power, but I don't think that the whole question of ideology is in fact the important factor here. It was simply a man who was very interested in becoming prime minister, of running this country.
It is something that we knew in the party over the years, but that I think most of us felt that we could have controlled. And nobody for 1 second ever imagined that he would have reached the stage of mass murder and violence of the brutal kind of October 19th to try to achieve that personal ambition.
When the party, the membership of the party, demanded disciplinary action to be taken against Bernard Cord because of his attempts to rein in the party, to control the party, to effectively run the party. People demanded some kind of disciplinary action, and what really happened is that Maurice came out there and defended him, saying that unity was important, that we must settle our problems internally, and that only way we can move forward is by not creating confusion within the party.
The Code Clique counter-revolution, as we call it, because it was a counter-revolution by the Code Clique, which completely destroyed the revolution. And after those events, as you now know, the revolution collapsed and the United States invaded and are still occupying our country.
What happened that day is that the people of Grenada, over 30,000 of them, hearing that Maurice Bishop was under house arrest for well over 5 days, decided to march onto Maurice Bishop's home, his official residence, where he was held under house arrest, and released him.
You have people in the streets like
I have in one poem like a river, you know, just flowing onto Bishop's residence to release him from house arrest. This show the love the people had, that they weren't going to accept that the Prime Minister, the beloved Prime Minister, was placed under house arrest by a few, what I term, ultra-leftists, men who is drunk on theory now, book knowledge, rather than the practical thing that they see out there. Look at the masses, the same masses you talk about. Look at the masses out there. But what respect do you show to the masses who is showing love for their leader?
He wanted to go onto the fort because of some telephone calls which he wanted to make. Because there was a lot of propaganda going on which suggested that Cuba was supporting that other clique who were trying to oust Maurice Bishop. And that was, of course, totally untrue. And Maurice Bishop wanted to clear Cuba's name. He wanted to establish the facts correctly. Maurice never expected the guns to be turned against the masses. Because as eyewitnesses have said, when the armored cars arrived in the fort and they opened fire on the people, Maurice's words were, "Oh my God, they have turned guns in the masses."
I think at that time he felt totally and completely betrayed, because he was a person who needed to have a spirit of camaraderie around, and that he got on with everybody. He was not a petty man, malicious, spiteful, conspiratorial, or anything like that. He was a whole person. In fact, his greatest strength perhaps was his greatest weakness, because he made no enemies. They were placed against a wall at Fort Rupert and mowed down.
What I should say, maybe they were too good. They just took, licks. They never hit anyone. They loved the people. They gave all that they had for the people of Grenada. And without any reason, they were killed. We are yet to find out why. It's a sad situation. From the political years of Grenada that I could recall, I would honestly say what Maurice has done in 4.5 years was never done by any other government. Whether they remain there 10, 20, or 25 years.
6 days later, following the executions and killings, 6,000 U.S. troops, supported by helicopter gunships, fighter aircraft, and a large naval task force from the world's most powerful nation, invaded Grenada, the smallest sovereign nation in the Western Hemisphere.
Last night, Mr. Reagan called congressional leaders to the White House to say he had approved the action. This afternoon, Secretary of State Schultz emphasized the U.S. will not be an occupying force.
We will leave promptly. We have no intention of staying there. And the government that will be produced by the people of Grenada is entirely up to them as far as we're concerned.
But in fact, the U.S. has a deep interest in Grenada.
Even some of the occupying troops are causing a certain amount of terror to the population. They're beating people, shootings. They've shot a few people. They've invaded their homes without warrants. The United States has the information, but of course it will be very damaging to them, because I will tell you with certainty that if the remains, whatever they are handed over tomorrow and an announcement is made to that effect on the radio, there will be thousands and thousands of people who would come out to pay their last respects. And this would be very embarrassing to the United States government, because in all their propaganda, they claim that Bishop was a dictator, cast in the mold of a corporator and conspirator in the Cuban-Soviet axis.
And I'm looking forward, at least in the future, for, you know, some leader of this country to rather take example from Maurice, you know, at least try and continue the work that Maurice had left behind, you know, like they develop the roads and build different industries. They have the nectar, you have the flour mill, but you need to, you know, improve on it, get it bigger, you know, and finish the airport and finish your free education. And free education and free medical care is something that Maurice Bishop implemented in this country. And it will be very detrimental to the people if whoever party wins the election this year takes away that type of gainings to the people.
Apart from the fact that we talk about the material thing, I think one of the things that we must stress is that the revolution did help people as individuals to understand themselves better and to grow as individuals. And I think this is one of the things that it has done for women. Women were able to see themselves not as just male-dominated and male substitutes, but as people who had a contribution to make.
Maurice Bishop teach the people what is democracy, what is all different types of politics, you know. And so the Grenadian people are conscious of the way of life, and they they feel, right, that the rightest way of living, the most genuine way, the best way in order to develop is to go Maurice Bishop way.
Because our duty is to continue the struggle against imperialism. Our duty is to continue to build our Grenada revolution and ensure that we, as one Grenada people, small as we are, will forge that wider, meaningful link and will ensure the unity of our people. Now, if the Grenada revolution, all power